All right, let's now look at how we get energy from plants. We're going to talk about policy. We're going to talk about the difference between corn ethanol and cellulosic ethanol. We're going to look at biodiesel, and we're going to look at energy research as well. So here we go. So bioenergy, we've talked about it a little bit in the past couple chapters, but we're also now going to look at how we use it as an energy source. Now, this does not result in a huge increase in the CO2 concentration that we kind of hear about a lot, but bioenergy does help us give more energy to ways of means. Okay, so when we're looking at this, just a pretty fun statistic for you, about 84% of all of the energy consumed in the United States is from a non-renewable, okay, so we can't, once we run out, fossil fuel, okay, that's what it is. So bioenergy is trying to take the place of that so that, because we can always renew it, we can always make new energy from that energy source. Non-renewables, we're not going to be able to do that. It's going to take, hundreds of years to do that. It's going to compare the energy source and then the percent of total energy. Okay, so natural gas, probably always going to have natural gas. It's probably always going to be a thing with us. About 24% of the total energy is natural gas. Okay, I want you to go down there a little bit and look at nuclear. About 8.5% nuclear. If you followed anything about this, this nuclear warfare in many different countries, you know that that is a thing still. Okay, hydroelectric energy, so we're looking at water energy, about 2.5. Go on down there to solar, 0.1. Okay, 0.1. So, and then a little bit up there, wind. Wind energy is starting to get pretty big. I mean, it's still less than 0.5%, but it's starting to climb. And I think when the 2019 numbers come out, we'll see a lot more than we see right here on this graph. But you know, we're trying to figure out some sort of energy source that's going to be able to not necessarily replace non-renewable energy, but help us with gaining momentum and getting other sources of energy as well. Talking about how it's going to affect you and I, you know, middle class. So let's look at energy in terms of policy. So you and I are taxpayers. You and I pay taxes, whether we're buying a candy bar at the grocery store, or whether we're filing our taxes, we pay taxes. We indirectly and directly subsidize different energy sources, fossil fuels being a big one of that. So we see the awareness, you know, public sees the awareness of those issues that we have with energy and how the prices kind of skyrocket when it's Memorial Day, and the prices kind of, you know, they're not as much in latent times in the year. We are definitely dependent on foreign oil, so we get oil from Saudi Arabia, we get oil from the Middle East, and we know a lot about global warming, and we have since Al Gore was in office, because he was kind of the pioneer of telling people about it and showing his concern about it. So we know about global warming, and those are all having to do with energy policy. So all of that wrapped in one. In 2007 was the Security Act. The Security Act was passed, and that was able to create create energy security. So how we're able to figure out, or how we're able to increase renewable fuels, but then minimize those greenhouse gases. How are we supposed to do that? So Congress passed this in 2007. It has been changed since then a couple times, and definitely not the same bill that it was in 2007. But it's, the whole goal is to make sure that we are increasing the way we use renewable fuels like wind energy. You know, you're seeing them pop up everywhere, but we're also trying to minimize those greenhouse gases, which we have seen proven that it does contribute to global warming. I remember my grandpa talking about corn ethanol and how he was interested to see how it was going to help or hurt the corn prices. We found out that it wasn't very good for corn prices. So once this came about in the late 90s, early 2000s, we figured out, you know what, we need to plant a lot more corn. So what happened? We planted a lot, America planted a lot more corn, and then the corn prices plummeted. And although people, different fuel companies were making billions of dollars, the corn farmer in the United States definitely was not making, in some cases, making ends meet. So corn is obviously the leading crop that we use for ethanol in the United States. I'm going to show you how we really break it down and how we change it from corn to ethanol, that process. But about 5 billion gallons were produced in 2007, and that's just kind of been the trend from then on. And it's typically blended with a gasoline, and you see that when you go to the gas station, and it says a percentage of ethanol is added into this, or you can still buy 100% gasoline. You can buy 9 to 10. It just kind of depends on what your vehicle and what you want to run. And it's also a distiller grain, and it's a pretty valuable, has a very, very valuable byproduct as well. Corn into a very, very fine powder, and then that is then liquefied into a meal, and then we use enzymes to convert the starch into a glucose, okay, so like a glucose substance, and then we throw in some yeast, and there's the chemistry, the table down there for you. And then it's going to separate the concentration from ethanol and water, and then and all the other impurities that it's going to be distilled out and separated into different technologies, separation technologies as well. So cellulosic ethanol, this is primarily for feedstocks or for crop residue. Okay, so forest residue, and it's a kind of a dedicated crop. So one thing that is pretty well known is that it's a pretty big advantage over corn ethanol as a perennial crop, and it also is more difficult than starch to convert to ethanol. And there's not any fuel production in the United States that we use this for. So when we're looking at the whole plant, when we're looking at that whole corn plant, we're looking at just the cob. We're not able to use that whole corn stalk into an ethanol yet in the United States. In other countries they do, but not yet in the United States. Plant material, it's going to go down into that cellulosic and convert, the cellulose to a glucose. Then that fermenting process is going to take place, and then distilling all of the concentration out of that ethanol. Now, that's going to take a lot more because you're not dealing with, that specific corn kernel. You're dealing with the entire plant. So that's cellulosic energy. Biodiesel, very big in this day and age in 2018, 2019. We use it as a substitution for petroleum oil. It's produced from canola oil, soybean oil, and it's an oil that we extract, and then we put into a little bit of a reaction with alcohol, and it has a presence of a catalyst, and then that chemical process will take place and give us biodiesel. So we're going to discuss this week in class a little bit how those differences in prices, or those differences in quality, really impact the way our machinery run, our vehicles run. We're gonna kind of talk about the myths and the truths and the falses of biodiesel versus ethanol as well. One is the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, the NREL, and that is a place where they conduct a lot of different types of research on anything from renewable electricity to fuels to the way we analyze those fuels, a lot of different engineering systems. And this was the pioneer of how we figured out how to use wind as energy. So kind of a big deal. And they also study the approach to convert biomass into different kinds of fuel as well. We'll talk a little bit about that this week too.